session today, which is the IAASB. Welcome, Billy. It only seems like, I think a few weeks ago when we had our first meeting. This is our second meeting of the 85th PIOB session. Trust everybody has had a good break and ready to go in the new year. As we are about to start the IAASB, Tom, I should mention that we had a session earlier where we had the observation memo, so we got to appreciate how the December meeting went. And we will be looking forward to an update that you will be giving us today. But feel free to touch on any other points that you think are important. But we look forward to your submission. I think let me hand over to you, Tom. And then the board members would come in at the end of your presentation, comments, questions, and the like. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Seho. And good morning to everyone from the frozen tundra of the Washington, D.C. area. Winter's definitely in full force here. I spent whatever free moments I had yesterday chipping ice away. We had like 6 inches of snow and then 2 inches of sleet and then another inch of freezing rain on top of it. So I got my exercise and calories burned yesterday. So that, in many ways, that's a good thing. And most importantly, I didn't injure myself in the process. As we get older, that's the big risk. Well, 2026 is off to a great start for us, and we're extremely busy already. And I just wanted to give you a sense of a couple of things before we go into the specific topics. First of all, and I've said this to you before, is that our work plan transition is in full force right now. While we may not be creating many major new standards for this year, we're not letting up by any means. We're busy and focused on areas of big impact, and obviously in the technology area, that means audit evidence and risk response, where we've talked about this quite a bit with this group previously, and we're going to talk about quality management today. But also it's all of our support and maintenance of existing standards, whether that's through the LCE project, which we'll discuss, or post-implementation reviews, or 5,000 support as well. The other thing is that the engagement with our stakeholders is very much a key priority. We've already had some great engagement, in-person engagements in Europe. I was in Paris and Brussels and the UK recently. And we're also conscious and sort of waiting a little bit of recent remarks by the SEC chief accountant as well. And we'll figure out how we can navigate some of the opportunities, but also make sure that we stay focused on our core standard setting objectives. So happy to talk about those matters, but I've got to focus on the 3 topics that you raised for us to talk about today. My goal is to be pretty brief in addressing them so we permit conversations. And Chair, if you would like, we can pause at each one so to permit focused conversation, or I could go through them all at once too. It's up to you. Okay. So change the page. So we're going to turn to the technology quality management workstream. Just a reminder to you that our technology quality management workstream is one of the 3 areas of targeted work on technology. First area, as I said, is audit evidence risk response. Second area is this quality management workstream, and then a number of discrete efforts, including the 500 series project that we're going to deal with from a technology mindset. The QM focus is really on how technological tools are approved, whether they're developed or procured, how they're monitored and integrated into engagements, how human oversight needs to be maintained, and how risk specific to emerging tech tools are identified and then mitigated. We've had this ongoing hypothesis that guidance will be the right place to start, and we could build off the principles of ISQM1 and ISO 220, and that may be the most agile way to get through the work and most helpful to the marketplace as practices take hold. So to test that hypothesis, we held 8 roundtables throughout the world. You're seeing on this sheet, this slide right here, how broad they were in terms of reaching out to a range of participants, going beyond just the practitioner community, but also including regulators, users, preparers, and others. This is the formal way we got input in eight different roundtables. We've largely partnered with national standard setters or accountancy bodies to get these going. And I think we got great feedback. And let's turn to the feedback that we got. So first, the idea is that technology is moving rapidly from the experimentation phase, particularly in the world of AI. And if we don't move quickly, we could very well find ourselves behind the time. Then we turn to the second big point is, how we ask practitioners and others how they're seeing QM1 and 220 applied in the marketplace. And, what we hear is we think that they're getting the core principles are conceptually robust, but what they're having trouble, or there may be some diversity of practice, is operationalizing those standards for the tools, particularly when the tools from AI are opaque and probabilistic. And so, what they would like is some consistency in terms of how regulators will enforce the application of these standards. They would like to ensure consistency across firms in terms of this, and some ability to gauge what best practice would be. And then we got 2 other sessions during our roundtables, if you flip the slide. And this really was what should we do about it at the board? And remember, working hypothesis was guidance. And really, so we got some push not only to focus on guidance in the near term, but where to focus the guidance around. And the focus in our mind had always been on governance, and that's really sort of where we're being told to governance of the tools, clear accountability across the tool lifecycle, how they're approved, how they're used, how they're monitored, and how issues that arise are being remediated. We're really not being told to get into full rule book approach to this, but focus on the suitability, whether the tool is being applied for the given purpose. And really, what stakeholders told us is lean into this quickly, and maybe in a topic-specific manner, and don't try to create one giant omnibus guide for how to use AI tools. So one last thing I'd like to point out, and this is Gabriella would probably be entirely aligned if you flip the slide, is that our roundtables, not surprisingly, pointed to a number of ethical dimensions related to quality management. You wouldn't be surprised by this. We're not surprised by it. And, the moral of the story is that we will continue to coordinate closely with IESBA on our efforts. And you can see some of the examples here on the slide. So that leads us to conclude that we definitely need to be ready to produce non-authoritative materials quickly on QM-related matters. And at our March board meeting, our staff will bring an action plan based upon what we've heard. Now, I've talked about this in the past, is what is our approach to developing this? And I'm not sure everyone remembers from a few years ago, we set up a framework for activities to govern our process for issuing guidance, and how much board oversight there would be in relation to this. And I think this is a question of, for you, is to make sure, like, if we're going to issue topics and they're going to come close to being more authoritative, what is our process for quality control? How do you know that the materials that are going to be used by practitioners and relied upon by regulators have gone through a robust process to get out the door? And we do have a channel which does sort of require board sign off on this. But we also are considering how we get expertise from external stakeholders who may have more specialized knowledge in this space than members of our board or staff. And so this is what I draw your attention to in this slide. What we think would be useful, at least in relation to this quality management workstream, is putting together a multi-stakeholder expert group that has specialized expertise, say 8 to 10, and this is very much under formation today. That obviously in a staff-driven model, staff would be responsible for driving the development of any materials with board supervision as well. That board would ultimately have to review and deliberate any guidance put out into the marketplace, and we would have some targeted consultation. So it has the closest thing to this approach is, you may remember, we put out the EER guidance, which ultimately became the basis for a lot of what we did on 5000. This is effectively a way of doing a little bit more formality, getting more expertise into the development of non-authoritative materials. And then, because it's transparent, that gives you insights to what we would be doing as well, and the broader stakeholder community. So that is on our mind right now. Nothing has been formalized. We're working through what we think is the best way to develop these materials, but having an expert group to assist us certainly would make sense, and more importantly, having more rigor through the board clearance process also would make sense, consider the critical nature of these materials. So I'll pause there to allow comments on anything related to technology and QM.
Board members, Dave?
Tom, thanks for that update and thanks for joining us today. With respect to this project, I'm going to ask a question, but if I say it in the form of a statement, it'll only be to test whether I'm understanding this correctly. Clearly, we want to understand, you want to understand how auditors are using AI and different forms of AI in executing the audit. It's also important that the IAASB understand how preparers are using AI in the preparation of financial information and how the auditor should address that in the execution of the audit. I just wanted to make sure both of those aspects were on the mind of the board as you consider, what, if any, sorts of guidance you need to issue.
Yes, very much so, Dave. Like that, those are both the things. Is why we can't sit still is that preparers are actually using these tools in the preparation of financial information, but also auditors are meaning to apply it. Like in this case on QM, obviously it'll have a little bit more emphasis on what's being developed by audit firms themselves. But a lot of that, of course, is in response to what's happened in the preparer community.
Tom, thanks, Tom. The other Tom?
Oh, thank you very much, Tom, for presentation. My question on this issue is that it's a discussion. It should be the discussion among the PIOB ourselves. But is there any idea of the role of oversight in this issue? Because this now will be presented to the IAASB board and then need some sort of the approval of the IAASB board. So some of the PIOB member will participate as an oversight provider. But might be a little bit challenge for PIOB to give a sort of the consistent comment on this issue. So I'm very glad if you have any idea of the role of the oversight in this new development of this new system of NAM. Thank you.
Yeah, so a couple of things, Tom. At this board meeting, we're not just talking about our action plan in relation to the specific non-authoritative material for QM. We are developing a broad framework on how we are going to consider our guidance or actions on technology-related materials. So there's that. So that provides an opportunity for input, obviously, in dialogue with the PIOB. Secondly, there's the approach to the non-authoritative materials, and partly why we're bringing sort of this idea of more formality to the mix. Like, I think the PIOB wants to, most importantly, is concerned that we have a robust process that is keeping the public interest at the center of our work, and that we have significant quality control behind it. And so this is partly why we're bringing this sort of approach and mechanism to you. And then thirdly, since we're going to talk about, to use the jargon of our framework for activities, our Channel 4 type approach which provides great transparency and approval on the guidance, you are going to have full visibility and ability to comment either in forum like this or through your observation of our board meetings on it. So I feel like, yeah, there's no certification process that needs to be, but in fact, that's not the way you solely exercise your oversight responsibilities. We're responsive to everything you say and consider it in due course.
Thank you very much. And at the same time, I personally think that there may be some sort of the necessity for a little bit closer relationship between staff, because this is also the staff-driven model, and maybe some sort of the closer communication between the IAAS staff and the PIOB staff may be more, how can I say, fit for this purpose for the agile discussion of this issue. It's my personal view. Thank you very much.
It's certainly one we're fully supportive of, and Vili's on the call right now, and he could explain a little bit about how often the teams are in touch. Vili, do you want to have a quick response to Tom's point there?
Yeah, thank you, Tom, and good morning, everyone. And yes, certainly we can, as it is, we engage with the PIOB staff at least on a quarterly basis. But I mean, we can always, as this project gets underway, we are certainly open to have more touch points with them. So we can certainly work on that, Tom. So, and then I obviously fully agree with the other points that Tom has made, including that part of this mechanism will also be that we want to upfront, and that will be apparent in that overarching document that Tom has been referring to, the overarching approach to addressing technology-related matters, is we do want to incorporate the PIF principles. Although this will not be standard setting, we do think the qualitative characteristics of the PIF would still be important to guide our work, even in terms of the non-authoritative materials. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Vili.
Thanks, Tom. I don't see any other hands. Maybe we move.
This is
apologies. Mark's hand just went up.
I just got it in quickly there. First of all, Happy New Year to all of you who've joined us. We look forward to another challenging year. I just wanted to just make a comment about this NAM, and I hear what you're saying about having your own process for the development of NAM, and I think that is great. But we are seeing more reliance on NAM And whilst clearly it's not standard setting and so therefore isn't within the certification process, I am certainly of the view that we need to perhaps working, I don't know, with the monitoring group, formalize more the relationship between the PIOB and both standard setting boards with regard to NAM and our role with regard to oversight of that. So sort of more formalize the contacts and review that we have.
So my only, first of all, Mark, great to see you, and congratulations to Aston Villa so far. I'm sure that's really what we should be talking about right now, other than NAM. But to me, I think the PIOB's general oversight role is robust in this area. Obviously, if we're working outside what the PIOB's view of the public interest is, then I would expect, just like a corporate directors would have on management, have an opportunity to push on as a governance body against us. So I'm not sure how much more formality you need, but I'm clearly very sensitive to that as chair of this board, that this is an important activity of our standard setting body and is subject to governance. And it's not like an extra jurisdictional type thing that we're getting doing off the books. But if we were doing something wrong on this, that we would get pressure from the governance body. And that's why we're hoping to be very transparent about it all.
Thanks, Tom. I see Felipe's hand went up as the man who observed the meeting in December. Felipe?
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Tom. Hello, Willie and James, my holiday season partners in New York. Yeah? It's good to see you again. Yeah.
Good to see you.
Maybe, Tom, you could say a word on the approach and the way you are going to engage a dialogue with different firms to be aware of the way the structure of the governance and the evolution in the area of artificial intelligence and new techs and so on, to accompany the technical evolutions, to have something which is very flexible and agile, and at the same time the way you would address the needs to cover the risks linked to the use of these new tools in the area of activity of preparers, because these are different populations to discuss with different risks.
Yeah. So I think we have many different means by which we're going to get input from the profession. I think that's the much easier one from our standpoint. We would imagine on this expert group that we would have all the major networks on it in terms of that, and we would hope to have a preparer or two representative body on it as well. We also are closely engaged with the GPPC and the former firm on these technical issues, and do bilaterals with them too. The reason why we do bilaterals time to time is because there's proprietary technological tools at play here. In terms of the preparer community, generally through the major bodies, through our SAC as well, but it is something that we're sensitive to and need to be a little bit more proactive at right now. Sometimes the easiest way to get to preparers is also via the firm sometimes too. So, Philippe, I'm sensitive to that preparer point, it's a little less natural for us because there's not as close a connection. But we know that the two things that are driving it are the technological tools that are being used in the corporate world, and also the tools that are being developed by accounting firms.
Probably, Tom, the preparers has a stronger link with the audit evidence and risk response project, I would say, in this technological risks assessment, in fact.
Yeah. So I think those are really good points. Okay, should I move on? I was almost kept it to 1/3 for my hour, but we'll go to LCE and maybe grab some time on this. So we're going to turn to the maintenance of the ISA for the LCE standard. We haven't talked about the LCE standard for a little bit, but I think the key question has always been, will people use our LCE standard? It's sort of, there was a movie, Field of Dreams, in the US, where the line was, if you build it, will they come? And I am pleased to say that there is momentum building behind the LCE standard, and it's not dissimilar to what we had for IFRS for SMEs. If you switch the slide, you'll see. Now, recognize this is a relatively small sample of jurisdictions. This isn't a broad IFAC related things. This really data comes from our jurisdictional standard setting group and information coming via that or through other sources. But you could see that within these jurisdictions, there's an initial wave of LCE standard adoption. And exactly as we would have expected, that there would be a leading edge, there'd be a number of jurisdictions that are keeping it under advisement, and then there's others that are saying, not for us now, and we'll wait, and we'll sit on the sidelines for a bit. And that's exactly where we are, but I am pleased that major economies are adopting this LCE standard, and they're telling us to provide them in the near term some stability and certainty in the marketplace around it. So this balance between stability and keeping our standard LCE standard in line roughly from a principal standpoint with the full ISAs has been one of the key balancing acts that we as a board are undertaking. If you flip the slide, you'll see, we'll talk a little bit about it. So the big thing we're trying to do is keep in mind, as the ISA shift, what can we do that keep these standards roughly in line from a principle-based way, but only in dealing with changes that are relevant to the context of an LCE itself, a less complex entity, and how do we make sure that whatever requirement we're undertaking is proportionate? Now, remember, when we started the LCE standard, one of the key elements is like defining what a typical less complex entity looks like. So this concept of relevance and proportionality is probably the most important thing we're trying to keep in mind. And if you go to the next slide, again, this goes to the balance. It's like stability in the near term. How can we use practical solutions and keep the standards aligned? So this is why we're given a little bit of period of stability, a few years before we're asking for any changes. And then how do we minimize the changes to keep it in line with the ISA? So if you go to the next slide, at the last meeting, we approved, of course, any standard setter likes to make things look a little bit more complex. A general approach to the maintenance of the LCE standards, and also specific project proposals as it relates to the recent standards that we approved that happened after the original LCE standard was made, and that includes going concern and fraud, for example. So we approved the project proposal where we're going to consider, the first step is to consider the relevance of the public interest issues of the changes, and then develop a solution that is proportionate in a way. And then at the end, it's almost like a stand back and say whether the proposed revisions to the ISA for the LCE achieve the project objective. And so we would have, just like in normal things, exposure draft, public consultation, outreach, response to feedback, and a final standard. What I would say is that the way I think about it as a board member, this is me, that what we're trying to do is the minimum viable product to keep the standards aligned. Personally, I believe stability in the LCE standard matters, that we should be very conscious of the proportionality elements of this, and do the least that's required to generate change, but keep the standards aligned. Because the tendency of standard setters is always to be risk averse and add more and more. We were very careful in in creating a standard that was proportionate to the LCEs in the first place, and we don't want to effectively balloon the LCE standard as a result of changes in the ISAs. This is not meant to be the full ISAs backdoored into the LCE standard. So that gives a little bit of the mindset. Vili, one last thing. I thought maybe it would be useful for you to comment on the timeline that we're planning on some of our work here.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Happy to do that. Maybe before I get to the timeline, also just building on what Thomas just said, in the approach statement about the maintenance of the ISA for LCE, which will obviously be a statement that has longevity because we intend to undertake maintenance projects as we go along. It is also clear that to achieve that balance that Thomas referred to, we are also very clear that we will stick to the design principles that were set out when we developed the original standard. And those design principles are summarized in the approach statement. So that will sort of be our check. That will make sure, are we keeping to these design principles as we go along and updating the ISA for LCE? And then in terms of the timing, how we've managed to, how we're setting this up is basically that the ISA for LCE revision process starts more or less when the full ISA is complete. This first revision project obviously works a little bit differently because of the 3-year period of stability that we wanted to provide after the initial issue of the ISA for LCE. But going forward, we expect that whenever the main ISAs are updated, we will then start a maintenance project more or less when the main proposals are finalized. Now, the next one, if you think a little bit into the future, the next one's up will be audit evidence and risk response. And shortly after that, the ISA 500 series. So again, in that instance, it may make sense to do those together. But in any case, what we will plan to do is we want to make sure that this process of maintaining the ISA for LCE can leverage fully the work that has been done on the full ISA. So we don't have to redeliberate points, redeliberate positions, etc. So the idea is that when the full ISA goes for approval, at that meeting or the next meeting, we will approve a project proposal for the ISA for LCE, which in practice, depending on whether it lands on a March or June or September or December, will lead to more or less a year lag time in terms of when the ISA for LCE, those updates become effective compared to the full ISA becoming effective, which again, we think is an appropriate balance in terms of stability, as Thomas explained. So that is in short what we will do. But in every project proposal, as in the one that we approved in December, as always, there will be a timeline that is set out in the project proposal itself. Thank you, Tom.
Great, thank you, Vili. So I'll pause here and get comments on our LCE standard.
Thanks, Tom. And I think it's important just to remind everybody that the PIOB did approve or certify the LCs in December 2023. And indeed, 3 years later, we are having the revisions. And therefore, PIOB confirms that support for the start of the revision to align the standards with the main ISOs. But let Dave come in there. I see his hand is up. I'll ask my question after.
Thank you, Chair. Tom, thank you for the update on this. And I do think, while I think that period of stability at the beginning was important, I think, thinking of ISOs for LCE, the ISO for LCEs as a continuous improvement project, just like everything else we do, is important. So I appreciate all of that. I wonder if you could just give some qualitative thoughts on the global adoption of the ISO for LCE. I appreciate the update and the visual that you gave of those who've adopted, those who are considering it and stuff. But I'm also interested in how you feel that adoption's going. Is it meeting expectations, exceeding expectations, not quite there yet, that you're having to work harder at this than others? I'm just wondering.
Thanks, Dave. And Tom, because Dave's question is linked to the one I wanted to also ask, maybe you can take the two of them at the same time. When I looked around the global adoption map, as you have depicted, I noted that in the Europe space, we perhaps have the lowest adopted status to date, even though we do have those under consideration. Would you have any additional insights as to, is it the market that we have, which perhaps has less of the area that this focuses on, or is it for any other reason? Thanks. Then Mark can come in after you, or you want to wait for Mark and then respond?
Up to you. How you like me to do it? Maybe take Mark's comments too, and then I'll respond to both.
That's fine. Mark?
Yeah, thanks, Shago. I just had a question really on this notion of stability for the LCEs. Now, it's true that we have this 3-year moratorium on amendments to the standard that was issued a few years ago. But of course, going forward, if the issuance of an ISA is a trigger for amendments to the standard for LCEs, you are of course going to be in a situation where you will have proposed amendments to the standard for LCEs at different stages of their development at any one time. So going forward, you actually won't have stability beyond the initial 3-year moratorium. I mean, does that conflict at all with your view that there needs to be stability on LCEs, or is it just a fact of life that the LCE standard will develop, in the same way as the ISAs develop, i.e. sort of essentially on a piecemeal basis going forward?
Yeah, let me deal with your question first, Mark, and then I'll get to the broader adoption question. I sense from your question you have a lot of sensitivity on the stability front. I'm personally with you on this, and I think there's going to be some art in terms of managing, and Vili alluded to this, like maybe holding some of the changes back to batch things together to provide more stability. I don't think our board is entirely aligned on this point, other than it shouldn't be too long of a gap between the ISAs and the ISAs for LCEs. I think there's a part of the board that would be more inclined to provide longer periods and gathering up, and there's parts of the board that would say that we shouldn't let these periods go too long, because the risk is that people will think it's a lower quality standard. You know, I have a lot of sympathy to gathering things up to it. And I don't think we've entirely resolved that question, other than it shouldn't be too long, and that there's some art to maintaining and balancing these approaches. What I wouldn't want to do is have a succession of annual changes anyway, and to some extent a pause in terms of issuing new standards will help in that regard, but the point is well taken. On the adoption front, I don't know what my full expectations were, but I think we're getting pretty good traction in the markets I would have expected to have the adoption. Now, in Latin America, we see efforts for adoption in Mexico, Guyana, Nicaragua, Chile, Barbados, Argentina, Venezuela. In Europe, we've already seen Sweden, Finland, Norway, Slovakia move to it, and under consideration Bulgaria, Croatia, Switzerland, Poland, and the Netherlands. In Africa, there's a growing number of countries, including major economies, that are adopting, including Nigeria and Kenya, Morocco, for example, and Asia, Oceania, Philippines, New Zealand, India, South Korea, Bangladesh, Thailand, Nepal. So, like, this is not necessarily limited to small economies. We're getting growth. In Europe, there's a little bit of a chill in the air on some of the adoptions, because the CEOB, as you remember from the very start, haven't been an enthusiastic proponent of the LC standard. But in the Nordics and in other areas, that it's under consideration. My hope is, as countries adopt the standard and they see it in place and it working, particularly at the level of smaller statutory audits, then it'll get broader acceptance. But I think we're on track for the level of adoption that you would expect in the first round.
Thanks, Tom. I don't see any other hands coming through. I think it's safe to say we can continue.
Great. So we'll get to the final technical topic that we're up to, which is the revision of ISRE 2410, interim review engagements performed by the auditor. That's a big point. We're very aware of the PIOB's recently issued points on this in October. I think we're pretty well aligned. Remember, the genesis of this project was, first and foremost, is that 2410 was like the loan standard that hadn't gone through any clarity initiative, and it was written in the old style and needed to be updated. Beyond the fact that our standards and our thinking have evolved in a number of places, and we wanted to modernize 2410. It was becoming an issue in the marketplace as a result. And so, very much in mind as we do this effort is that we really are seeking to be clear about the work effort requirements, and clear about what the communication of the end product is, that it is a limited assurance engagement, and it is a review engagement, and it should not be confused confused with an audit. One big thing is, I was hoping that some auditor was on this slide going to figure out that we made a mistake. Approval of this is not planned for March 2025. This is for March 2026. So I got a heart palpitation that we need to be doing a lot more work between now and in the past. But yes, we don't have a time machine here. We'll approve it this March. So if you look on the next slide, this is where we're going to in terms of what how we're updating the standard. So 2400 are general review engagement standard. And remember, this is a standalone standard, even though the numbering conventions sort of may suggest implication. We're drawing on concepts and principles that are relevant to interim review engagement of 2400. We're taking proportional topics from modernized ISAs. And then there have been a lot of jurisdictions who have already updated 2410 since we were so far behind the game on this one. And we're looking to them and their guidance and help to draw upon it. And remember, as I said, we're very clear about the work effort here. This is not an audit, and we're very clear that we need to be clear to any users of the report that this is a review engagement providing limited assurance. If you go to the next slide, we've identified 10 key areas of work that's the focus of this project and what we're doing. Remember, the big thing is that this is work done by an auditor, and being clear about how you can leverage that work and to assist in the work effort here. It is, again, a standalone effort. One thing I want to draw you to attention to, Philippe probably heard this discussion. Materiality always comes up. We're being very clear about the requirements in relation to materiality and how you go about applying materiality at an interim stage. There was a big discussion about how this could be different than the audit, but our point is it's driven by the facts and circumstances of the interim engagement, and that's what the assurance provider will need to do, in this case, the auditor. So drawing your attention to that. I think maybe the most important thing is to focus on the three issues that the PIOB has highlighted to us. On the next slide. Group interim review engagements. I think this is a situation very similar to what you raised when we were doing sustainability assurance, and we're trying to take a very similar approach. There was a suggestion at our board meeting is that it should be all left to application material, and that was not the approach of our board, that we need to have a mixture of requirements and application material. We're not going to bring all of 600 into 2410, but the general principles and approaches and really where we're talking about requirements is in planning, including involvement of component auditors, communication among the engagement team, and the consolidation process are areas where we probably need enhanced requirements and then appropriate application material. So you were comfortable with our approach on 5,000, or relatively comfortable. We hope that you'll be comfortable with our approach to the group interim review engagements here. We're being, not surprisingly, a specific emphasis on going concern and fraud. This is very much, both of them, a work in progress. We know we have to enhance the requirements here. And in relation to going concern, we want to have an explicit statement. It's how we get that explicit statement right, considering the language that's in a limited assurance engagement, which it tends to be a negative statement. So making sure that that's useful and not just a form of legalese, but people know what it's saying, is what we're working on right now. So those topics will come back to our board. Obviously, we knew that there's more work. I'm waiting anxiously to see what the teams come up with. I have not reviewed the most recent board papers, and I know the teams are working very hard with amongst themselves and with the board project members as we get up to the March board meeting. So those are two topics on the table where we know that the PIOB has a real interest. So we're moving forward on this project. We expect approval of the ED this year, not last year. And I would welcome any comments you have.
Thanks, Tom. Quickly, let's go to the other Tom. Tom?
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Tom, for sharing your update. And then especially mentioning the materiality issue I really appreciate that, because perhaps you have heard that there is a big discussion in Japanese constituency in this issue, because the current Japanese practice is that the interim review is sometimes perceived as the mid-time progress check for the annual audit, but the new 2410 clarifies that the determination of materiality for the interim review engagement is done with reference to the interim financial information rather than annual financial information. So the principle has become very clear, but at the same time, there is a gap between the current practice and this principle. So I think that currently Japanese regulators are soliciting the view of the PAs and the preparers and the investors as well. So I think that this IAASB's discussion is giving a very good impact on the discussion among the Japanese constitution. And then I suppose that the same thing may be happening in other jurisdictions as well, and then will continue to happen after you've published the ED. So I just hope that this good impact or this good communication with each jurisdiction will continue after issuing the publishing the ED. So just I would like to appreciate your efforts, not only on the board, but at the staff level as well. Thank you very much for that.
This is certainly an area we expect to get comment on during the exposure draft period, which, actually, I think we've probably have a diversity of practice throughout the world on this topic. And one of the goals of standards is to bring clarity and consistency in terms of practice. So if that's the result, I think it's a good thing. I believe where we landed is the right place. I don't see any other way to do things in a standalone engagement, except on the issue of what you have before you. But we're always open-minded, and we'll hear what practice comes back to us on and other commentators come on. And certainly we want to hear from investors on this topic too, because that's really the mindset that sets the materiality thresholds.
Thanks, Tom. Looking at the time, we have 7 minutes left before Gabriela joins us, but let me go to Mark.
Yes, I just wanted to ask a question about something which is very important to users, and that is the understanding of the distinction between reasonable assurance in an audit and limited assurance in an interim review. Obviously, this will be an important part of the communication aspects of this standard. And the last IAASB meeting that I attended back in June last year, there was a lot of discussion around this. And I just would like to ask, what progress has been made in articulating this difference in the standard or in the draft standard, and indeed in the thinking around the draft review report to stakeholders.
I think, Mark, we're very focused on being very clear what this engagement provides, and using the report to be very clear about what a limited assurance engagement offers users. I don't think in the standard itself we'll go into full articulation about the differences between limited and reasonable assurance, but we are taking steps in the drafting of the standards to be very clear about limited assurance. And Billy will provide a couple of examples of the actions we're taking.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. And Mark, you're quite right. This is a very important area, and also maybe even more so in this project because of the proximity between the two engagements. You've got the auditor of the entity performing the audit, and then in a lot of jurisdictions, 6 months later, the interim review engagement. So from a standard point of view, we have tried to clarify those concepts right up front in the standard in terms of a limited assurance, standalone engagement, also the link with the audit. Even though the auditor may, in terms of the normal cycle of planning the annual audit, be already starting doing work on the audit while they're also doing the review, making sure that those things are approached with a different lens. This is review work that is required as support for a review conclusion. So we've tried to make that clear in the standards for the practitioners that are using the standard. In terms of the users that will be interested in the product of the engagement, that will definitely be the report. And I think that's probably one of the biggest areas of modernization that we've been doing. Since Extant 2410 was issued, a lot has happened on the reporting side in our standards, including the auditor reporting project that we undertook, as well as more recently in ISA 5000, where this was also a very important issue, a very important aspect. So we have made sure that we retain all of that good thinking in terms of being very clear in our language, in terms of the review, that the review has been performed in accordance with ISRE 2410, that a review engagement, the work and the assurance obtained is substantially lower than in an audit. So we're trying to make those distinctions within the review report as well. And we've also changed the structure of the report so that it is more familiar to users. So those are some of the things that we are doing, very conscious that this is a very critical area. And again, I think the exposure period will give us the opportunity to see if we've struck the right balance. And we will certainly make sure, as part of our outreach that we do during the exposure period, is that we particularly target users. And we are about to have our first inaugural meeting of our new user advisory group in February. And I think that group will be a great opportunity for us to make sure that for purposes of this standard, we've got the balance right. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you, Billy.
Thank you, Tom. 2 minutes left. Is there anything else you want to share with us?
No, and I'd be happy to. Just the last thing I would say is in the appendix, we included the current state of our work program just as an informational tool for you. In the remaining minute or so, I'm happy to answer any questions on that or any other matter, or otherwise I'll yield the time back to you.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you to, I think the other board members said it earlier, to you and your board, and definitely Billy and team for the submission that has come through today to keep us up to date, and more importantly, share this in the public session such that it's shared to the wider audience beyond just PIOB. So thank you for your efforts and team. Right, I believe Gabriela is already here and she has been with us for a while. I still don't see her on my screen, but I'm sure
I am here, Chego.
She'll pop up quite soon.
Hello.
Thank you. Thanks, Gabriela, and welcome. Are you with Ken or you are alone today?
I should be with Ken. I don't know if he has joined already, but if he hasn't joined yet, he must be joining shortly.
All right, no problem. I'll welcome him in absentia. I'm sure he will see the recording that I did welcome him. Thank you, Gabriela, for your submission as well to the PIOB to keep us up to date. We did have Mr. Robert Buchanan at the December meeting who had observed the meeting, and we had his observation memo, which we took into consideration as we prepared for your update today. So without any further ado, let me hand over the baton to you to take us through the update coming out of the IESBA meeting in December. Thanks.
Hey, thank you very much, Chair. As you know, the presentation touches upon 3 topics suggested by the PIOB: firm culture and governance, the role of CFOs and technology. I don't know if you want me to go through the whole presentation and take questions afterward, or if you want to stop in between, but you can let me know as we go. Yes, I'll try to be.
Sorry, Gabriela. I think I'm happy to go with the approach we had for Tom, so that after each submission, we take a small pause and we move after the questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chair. So the first topic on our agenda, so the 3 topics that I intend to touch upon are exactly topics that we have discussed and on which we have made some decisions in our December board meeting. Of course, the board meeting agenda went much beyond these 3 topics, but they were 3 substantial topics that we discussed there. So on firm culture and governance, I think that this is mostly about giving the PIOB an update about where we are. The PIOB has been following this project for quite some time now, and stating the support to the project and the direction. But as you also know, we decided at some point to reduce the pace of the development of this project, given to some questions, some uncertainty, and the understanding that we needed to give stakeholders and ourselves a little bit more time to mature the project a little bit more, but also to improve communications in the sense that there were some questions about what exactly we're doing, what decisions were we making, what was the public interest that we were trying to serve, and so forth. So we decided to approach the project in a slightly different way and to develop what we call the viewpoints, about which I have already briefed the PIOB, but that I'm sure that Robert Buchanan briefed the board as well. And to engage in an intensive and extensive outreach program between January and June before we make the decision about which kind of framework are we going to develop. And this is what this slide speaks about. It's this outreach plan that we have put forward for these 6 months between January and June. It's a, so to speak, 4-pronged approach to outreach, and the idea is that we intend to cover the maximum number of stakeholders, the groups, all the groups of stakeholders, to support the solid anchoring of the decision that we will make in extensive, meaningful, practical information coming from all stakeholders, all groups of stakeholders. This will span meetings with senior leadership, focus group discussions that we are now in the process of forming, this focus group discussions, the usual stakeholder meetings, and also a simulation exercise that by December we weren't sure yet if we could put in practice, but for now it seems well, advancing well, progressing well, with already one firm stating their openness and willingness to participate, and probably a second firm, a smaller one, also wanting to engage with us. This means that we will have the usual meetings with the big groups of stakeholders. We will have one-on-ones with leadership, focus groups, with GPPC firms, small and medium firms, regulators, and also engage with investors, not with focus groups because it's a little bit more difficult with this group of stakeholders, but surely engaging with investors as well and other stakeholders. So next slide, please. For the purpose of ensuring an inclusive and meaningful and open, transparent engagement with stakeholders, and to respond to some comments that we have heard lately about sometimes it's difficult to understand what you want, sometimes you reach out to the wrong people who don't understand what you're saying, sometimes you use complex and too extensive documents. We developed these viewpoints, and these viewpoints basically are built upon the 8 elements of a future framework that we have identified in the report approved by the board in 2024 and extensively discussed in the roundtables that we organized in 2025. These 8 elements gave birth to these viewpoints, and the viewpoints are a tool, an instrument to allow us to engage, to foster a meaningful and clear dialogue with stakeholders in a very simple way, in a very short format, so that everyone is able to understand what we have in mind and what do we want to discuss. They are not a product, they are not a final product, they are just a tool, an instrument of inclusiveness and engagement with stakeholders. That's what they intend to be, and that's the instrument that we are already used after launching or publishing these viewpoints less than 2 weeks ago, or 2 weeks ago, when we were in Asia, and which were already very useful for the Asia outreach that we have been undertaking, and we undertook over the last 2 weeks. So the idea of these viewpoints is really to try to get to achieve a practical and very simple and responsive tool to engage with stakeholders, to foster inclusive dialogue with stakeholders, and to get the maximum information possible, and aligning the minds and about the objectives of the project and the path to achieve these objectives. So next slide, please. The 8 viewpoints, as I said, are based on the 8 elements that we had identified as possible elements, components of a future framework. And they include, as they were presented and published, on the one hand, the public interest rationale of each one of the elements of a possible framework, and on the other hand, the features or the components or the characteristics, how you want to call it, of each one of these elements, which are considered the necessary ones to achieve the public interest outcome that we have identified for each one of the viewpoints. Of course, the idea is that they will all work together and not individually or separately to, in an integrated way, create this framework that's supposedly, and that is the intention, will help firms, will help creating a global baseline, and will help firms build their own robust firm culture and governance frameworks and instruments to make them more resilient. Next slide, please. So to support this idea that we needed to engage on a significant, open, transparent, close outreach with stakeholders, we conceived this Firm Culture and Governance Dialogue series. And this dialogue series are, on the one hand, a publication, but also a set of initiatives which are conceived to support global engagement on the organizational drivers which we consider necessary and we want to discuss of ethical behavior in accounting firms. They build on upon the IESBA's viewpoints across the 8 elements of firm culture and governance, and they aim at inviting firms, regulators, professional bodies, other stakeholders to test ideas, share experiences, and help shape a practical, principles-based global framework to strengthen the ethical culture, public trust, and long-term resilience across all service lines. The objective of this dialogue series is to seek input on what makes sense, what is relevant, how can a global FCG baseline help firms building resilience, which location should we choose or decide for this future framework, the code or outside the code, which level of authority, should it be mandatory, non-mandatory, and mix of both. All these questions are still open, and that's it's on these questions that we want and seek to receive feedback from stakeholders, so that in June, and that is the objective, we make a careful, meaningful, grounded, based on practical information, decision about which kind of framework will we develop at that time. It can be one thing or the other, or a mix. That's what we are going to test with stakeholders. Next slide, please. So, since the start of this project, or when we started discussing this project with stakeholders, one question that came frequently to us at the PIOB, made it as well, was how this firm culture and governance framework relates, intersects with ISQM1. Initially, we hadn't thought about developing a lot of work around this topic, because for us it was clear that one thing is one thing and the other thing is another thing. But we realized and acknowledged that there was some confusion and some concerns in the marketplace, within our stakeholders, about what does this mean for us, the firms who have already implemented or are in the course of implementing ISQM1. There were some concerns that there were some overlap, some contradictions, that this future framework might force reopening what the firms have already done in terms of implementing ISQM1. So some concerns that we realized that we needed to respond in a clear way. So, therefore, this decision to develop in close coordination with IAASB and with strong support from IAASB, this linkage document between ISQM1 and the firm culture and governance. This aims at responding very directly to stakeholder questions, PIOB questions, and even SSP questions from IAASB on how the IESBA viewpoints align with ISQM1, and what firms need to do, if anything, beyond ISQM1 to implement this framework, which is a question that does not have an answer for many reasons. And one of the reasons is that because FCG, it's not yet a framework, it's not yet, it's not a standard, but also we came to the conclusion that, well, we already had in mind that these are different things. So this document shows at a high level how the IESBA viewpoints and ISQM1 are mutually reinforcing, but at the same time it clearly distinguishes the objectives of the two, ISQM1 and the FCG, the scope, the focus, and the outputs. So with this, it does not aim or does not intend to be a like-for-like assessment and comparison between ISQM1 and FCG. Just to start, because on ISQM1 we are speaking about requirements, we are speaking about a standard, while FCG for now it's nothing, it's just a collection of ideas that we are testing. But beyond that, because the comparison is clearly showing that we are speaking about different things with respect to the scope, with respect to the focus, with respect to the outputs and the objectives, which are, in the case of firm culture and governance, really about building solid ethical culture and governance in the firms, at the firms level, to drive ethical behavior within the firms. So this is where we are. This document has already been published, and I'm sure that the PIOB has seen it. It has been submitted to the December board meeting, and there was a subsequent decision made at staff level to continue developing these viewpoints. Continue developing this document with respect to the other viewpoints, because this initial work was made based on two viewpoints, just to have an example of how they would interact one and the other. Maybe this would be enough, but we decided to continue the work with IAASB, and very grateful to IAASB for the great support, technical and strategical support to this work, to work together to develop the comparison between the other 6 viewpoints, so that all stakeholders can have very clear how one and the other intersect, and be hopefully satisfied that the result is not concerning from the perspectives that some stakeholders and some groups were afraid of. And Chair, I think I'll stop here for now. If you want to have to take, I am happy to take some questions. Or
Thanks, Gabriela. And I see Tom is first. Tom?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Gabriela, for updating us. The one question, on the page 4, you have the 4 pillars, and then the 4th one of the simulation exercise is very new and then very interesting. You mentioned that there are a few or just 1 or 2 firms which is cooperating for this exercise, and could you clarify which area is that an Asian, or is that an US, is it an European, and then what size is that, a small medium-sized practitioner or large-sized one, or is it a multidisciplinary model, or is it focused on the assurance practice? It might be very helpful if that sort of the exercise will be, conducted and shared with the other stakeholders, and especially the relationship of the ISQM1 and this viewpoint may be a little bit clearer if you go deeper in this exercise. So perhaps, and it may be very helpful if you could share a little bit more with this exercise. Thank you.
thank you very much, Tom, and happy to clarify. So this idea of the simulation exercise started with something that I think I mentioned to the PIOB the last time we met, which was this idea of field testing. Taking it into the very practical ground and the environment, and see what works, what doesn't work, what is necessary, what is not necessary, and work with the firms directly to see which results we could achieve. Well, the field testing was very much discussed, and we have reduced our ambition a little bit to this simulation exercise, which was what was practically the only possibility that we had of doing something similar or along those lines. The simulation exercise, anyway, it's gonna take significant resources from the IESBA, from many perspectives. So we will do just what we can do, the maximum that we can do, and the maximum that we can do. After many discussions at different levels, is to field test with one big firm, GPPC one. So, with all the characteristics of a big firm, with different lines of service therein, with a global, sophisticated, all these things. And we will field test with a smaller company. So this one based in the UK, so Europe, and we are exploring and most probably be able to field test with a smaller firm, say medium sized, from the Middle East. If you ask me why these choices, the choices are very candidly and very honestly, most of the times driven by the capacity and the ability that we have to reach out and receive positive responses from some firms, but of course having in mind that we needed to diversify the geographic areas. And since the Middle East is being a little bit left outside some of the initiatives, the roundtables, the outreach most of the times, etc. But at the same time, they have demonstrated a strong willingness to collaborate in these areas of firm culture and governance. So we thought it would be a good idea. This is not yet completely certain. The last final decisions are still being made at that level. But for sure, what I can tell you, Tom, is that for any reason, it's not this smaller firm, we will find another one, because even if it takes a lot of resources on our side, we acknowledge that testing only with one big firm could be not enough. Mm-hmm. This is going to give us what is going to give us. It's the example of one firm, but well, the big one, of course, it will take the shared experience of GBPC firms. So it's a broader, I would say, sample than just the firm. The smaller firm, I think it's going to give us the idea of what is possible, what are the big obstacles, which are the big ambitions as well of these small firms, and create some kind of nudge to the others to look at this exercise and think about it. What I can tell you is that I believe that some other firms will be very happy to engage in this exercise, but the exercise needs to be facilitated by external providers. This be very clear has a cost, associated cost, and it takes a lot of resources from the IESBA at a point in time where we are facing some issues in terms of human resources. Some people left, others are having some issues. So this is what's possible, but I'm very happy and I'd say proud for us to have been able to put this ambition in practice of getting some more practical and concrete information coming from the firms, which may inform our decision next June. I think this will be this can be helpful for the firms as well, I believe, and that's why they are also excited to participate, but we'll see.
Okay, thank you very much.
And of course, this will cover the whole elements of the framework. So of course, directly or indirectly, ISQM1 will be brought into the discussion, but it's not, the objective is not to test ISQM1 because it's a different thing.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Gabriela. I don't see any further hands, and therefore I would assume we can continue, Gabriela. Thanks.
Okay. So thank you very much, Chair. Role of CFOs. This is also a project about which we have already spoken, and I remember listening to some questions on our last meeting in October or November, I think, which I'm happy to say that I think that we are in a position to respond now after the initial work that we have been doing. So next slide, please. Why this project? And I'm going to be quick because I think I have already spoken about it. But anyway, I think it's always good to remember why we are doing this project. Well, first reason, very formal, it's because it was in our strategy and work plan. It has been suggested by stakeholders, approved by everyone, and applauded inclusively. So that was a reason. But we really think that there is a public interest, underlying public interests in developing this project. And the underlying public interest is that, well, let me start from the start. We started by gathering information, and that's what we are still doing. And the initial initiative was a pulse survey, relatively restricted, but which covered, I think, 6 jurisdictions and got 150 responses. Ken is there to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was around 150 responses. And this initial pulse survey and the outreach that we have already been doing to date suggests, unfortunately, significant inconsistencies and raises some significant relevant questions with respect to whether CFOs or other equivalent financial professionals are able to identify ethical dilemmas and how they can be handled, whether a high-quality ethical code is consistently considered and applied by the CFOs in their roles, namely the IESBA code, and some questions about the support model of the PIOs, the professional organizations, for CFOs when ethical dilemmas arise. I would say now, the support from PIOs to alert these professionals to the existence of ethical dilemmas and the need to identify them. So the combination of these factors raise risks to the public interest, which are accelerated, and this was the initial conviction, by emerging technologies such the use of AI, additional responsibilities such as regarding sustainability reporting, the dynamic and different geopolitical forces and trends, a loosening of governance regulation globally, which is something that some stakeholders have flagged already to us, namely from the corporate governance community, such as at least in some parts of the world, the focus put on growth first and foremost, and neglecting a little bit governance considerations, etc. And the involvement of CFOs more and more in strategic decision making. Maybe some CFOs will say, well, this is nothing new to me because in the past, I have already dealt with sustainability and technology and strategic decisions. And that's right, that's fine, but that's not for the majority of CFOs have seen this evolution more recently, and we need to test if the code of ethics is still fit for purpose to respond to these increased risks, ethical risks posed by the evolution of the role of the CFO. This is what we are looking for. This is what we are trying to do, and trying to gather information which will tell us if we can do something, if there is something that we should do. Now, before, or maybe we can move to the next slide. It's more or less indifferent, but what I'd like to share with you now, and it's not in the slides, it's besides the input, the feedback and the insights that we got from this initial pulse survey and some outreach that the project team has already been developing, and with the board member David Ray advising this group. He was a CFO himself with a big company, so he has the experience, the background, and the understanding. Besides this outreach and what we learned from this pulse survey and this outreach, this recent outreach in Asia was very eye-opening with respect to the situation, which is probably a little bit more concerning than what we expected it to be. Well, of course, we cannot generalize and say this is the reality everywhere for all the groups and etc. But we had meetings directly with the CFOs in Singapore, in Malaysia, and in Hong Kong. And the reality is that they are very far from the awareness of the ethical duties, very far away. Some of them more than the others, but they insisted on the focus on commercial objectives to be ultimately what they need to pursue. So, putting ethics and commercial objectives like as opposites that between which they need to choose. And third conclusion, that there is a significant space for the professional organizations locally, probably. I'm not speaking about the global ones, which probably have a different approach, but the professional organizations locally have here a good space for action. Because that's the conclusion that probably they are not enough aware and focusing on the issue at hand. What's the problem? The problem is that these people are the first line of defense. And this is something on which the IESBA will insist as we go, because we are always focusing on the issues related to auditors. And of course, there are issues. There are times where auditors do what they should not do. There are times where auditors don't do what they should do. But most of the time, the problem starts before. The problem starts at the preparation of the information, of the reporting moment. And there, the CFOs and other finance professionals, need to be aware of the ethical responsibilities that they have, need to be aware that there is a code. If they are PAs, if they are professional accountants, they need to abide by a code which includes clear guidance and clear requirements in terms of their behavior, and there needs to be some kind of oversight or monitoring about how they are behaving. So probably we will need to start a little bit behind the point where we thought we were going to start. but we need much more information, and we don't want to generalize this way from the conversations that we had so far, which were not, I must say, encouraging in terms of the situation, but that this makes the case for us even more important and relevant, because the IESBA has a role to play here in making sure. We don't know how, we don't know where this project will bring us, but there is something for sure that needs to be done in this space. So this is where we are, and looking at this evidence-based approach that we are taking. The outreach that is being planned is massive, and I'm going to say again, massive, in terms of including an impressive number of groups of CFO-related groups and entities. I was checking the plan this morning. I was really speechless with the number and variety of groups that are being included in this outreach. This will include some roundtables, global roundtables, some of them in person, some of them in virtually, as we usually do. But besides that, there are some other initiatives being organized, namely with PAOs, with ACCA, ICAUW, and entities in groups like this, to make sure that once we have a report and a recommendation to the board, we will do it based on extensive information gathered with groups which are not that familiar to us, because the truth is that historically CFOs have not been that much in our remit, and the result is what we see. They are very far away from these ethical responsibilities and the existence of a code. We know that there are issues related with the governance, with the codes of ethics at the company level, which don't say anything close to what the code of ethics say, because we have examined this code of ethics. They are useful, they are good, but they are for a different purpose than the IESBA code of ethics, which is for professional ethics in developing the work as a practitioner, as a preparer. So that's where we are. This slide tells you what's the plan for the next few months. Over these 2 next quarters, we will engage. We will be doing these roundtables, but many other engagement initiatives in many different formats, so that hopefully by September, we will have a report from the project team making some recommendations to the board. I don't want to promise, because this is going to be really massive and difficult, and we may need to delay a little bit, but the idea and the plan is that in September we will have a report. And I'll stop here, Chair, and I'm happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you, Gabriela. I think the message is loud and clear with regards to what you've termed as the public interest focus, which is really talking to the CFO as shaping the tone at the top in terms of their key gatekeeping role in the organization. And I think you put them as the robust first line of defense against the public, against erosion of the public trust in business. And really this talks to the shaping of ethical business dealings as shaped by the tone at the top, which is the CFO in this case. Let me open, I think, the conversation to the board members, comments, questions, clarifications to Gabriela on this topic. Mark.
Okay, thanks, Shago. It is certainly true that business generally has become more complex, continues to become more complex, and with it the role of the CFO. But I think this project, in being drawn around the CFO specifically, might be too narrowly scoped, because I think it's based on a fairly old-fashioned view of the role of the CFO, that he is the one that determines the numbers exclusively, and is the sort of the first line of defense, as you say. I actually think that you need to look at accountants in business as a whole, because it's actually the ethical standards in all layers of management that need to be examined. For example, in preparing your financial statements, if we just look at that, the CFO actually has a relatively small role these days in practice, and it's much more down to controllers, chief accounting officers, and so on, who, as this project is drawn, wouldn't be included within it. Equally, you could have a CEO who is an accountant, but would not be covered by the scope of this project. So I would recommend that actually a broader view is taken, and the question at issue should be whether accountants in business generally need to have enhanced ethical guidance. And I say accountants because I think, that the name is on the tin, really, that IESBA is about ethical standards for accountants. And we need to avoid sort of mission creep here potentially into other professions where non-accountants to which IESBA standards actually wouldn't apply. So, and I welcome your views on this, but as I say, I think this should be more broadly drawn, looking at the enhancements that are required, if any. I suspect there are some for accountants in business generally, rather than just the CFO community.
May I respond, Chair?
Thanks, Mark. And yeah, Gabriela, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mark. So, of course, we will take this comment back for consideration. We probably need to refine the scope a little bit, I agree, because the code already includes provisions for professional accountants in business, specifically about CFO. Well, it's a little bit different. And you're right that preparation of financial reporting and other reporting involves others than just the CFO, while the CFO is the ultimate responsible for that, but agree with that. On the other hand, what we are also addressing is the role of the CFO itself in its new strategic positioning, requirements, etc. And that is something that our outreach so far has confirmed as well, that CFOs are more and more being required to take part in strategic decisions, to make decisions with respect to, for instance, the kind of technology that they use, the data sources, all these things, which is for the CFO to decide, not for all the professional accountants in business. So, of course, this poses a lot of questions. We will take that comment back about the possible enlargement of the scope. But just a final comment. I see that Ken also wants to add something, and of course, but let me just add that with respect to the non-professional accountants in business, I'm not saying that we are going to end up this project by setting standards for non-accountants, but we cannot run away from the problem, and we need to face it. And the problem is that professional accountants in business play a significant role in business, but there are many equivalents to CFOs and preparers and etc. who are not CFO, and that creates a dilemma for us, because what we have heard from others is that it makes no sense, and that will not serve the public interest entirely if only part of these professionals are part of this, are covered by this standard. So we are in a very early days. These comments are very welcome because it takes us to think broader broader than just the initial scope we had considered. But we are in very initial phase of the project, and we will listen to stakeholders and come back to the PIOB, of course, with the evolution of our thinking in terms of the scope of the project. And Ken, I think you, if Diego allows, I think that Ken wants to add something, which is very welcome on my side.
Yeah, I saw his hand. Ken, welcome, and please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Diego. And I'll be very brief, just to supplement what Gabriela has said, and just to be very clear that this workstream is not focused solely on CFOs. However, we may want to define CFOs because the scoping, at least insofar as information gathering is concerned, is around CFOs and individual PIBs in equivalent senior finance roles. So these could be chief administrative officers, even CEOs, so long as they have a nexus to the responsibility for the financials of the and the reporting side of the entity. So that's really something that I really just want to make sure everybody understands. But certainly the point that Mark has raised is very welcome, as Gabriel has put it, and we will take that into consideration as we further explore how we're going to cover the individuals who have the relevant roles vis-a-vis this first line of defense principle that we're looking at, this concept of first line of defense. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Mark, do you still want to continue, or okay?
Yeah, could I just
then I'll come to Martin after.
Yes, could I just come back on that? I think the dilemma that you talked about, Gabriela, I think actually that dilemma is caused by the fact that you've labelled this project as, you know, the role of CFOs, because that in itself creates the dilemma. If it was just talking about accountants, that dilemma wouldn't be there. And the other thing I would just add as well to my remarks is, I think before sort of proceeding too far with this project, you need to be mindful of the allocation of your resources. You know, you just said in your remarks earlier that you were speechless about the extent of the outreach that would be required for this particular project. Yet, when we were discussing the FCG project earlier, you were saying that, well, we can only really speak to 2 accounting firms because we have constrained resources. So, and there's a little bit of a disconnect there. So, I think perhaps think very carefully about the scope of this project, and also, you know, the extent of it, and whether it is appropriate or possible to go ahead with it in full at this stage compared with you know, your other priorities.
Thanks, Martin. I guess that was a comment that Gabriela will and Ken will take into consideration as well. Martin?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Gabriela and Ken, for being with us. Question just for understanding, really, from the main slides and the references there are plenty of references to lack of awareness, and to some degree, then I think the question is, and I accept where you are at the current time and beginning on this journey, but is it seen primarily as an issue of raising awareness, or is your perception that there are critical aspects of part 2 of the code dealing with professional accountants and business that are so, let's say, incapable or outdated of providing a framework for the new challenges that you anticipate or you've been hearing about in some of the countries? So is it more an awareness issue, which obviously then would raise a question about responsibility for ensuring awareness and implementation, or do you actually see there are fundamental gaps with the current code as it currently exists? Now, I think in your next topic, you're going to talk about technology, and we heard from Tom as well about there were interesting things coming from the technology side, but leaving technology for a moment, are there other gaps or points of concern within the code in relation to the treatment of professional accountants in business. Is that really a focus, or is it more the awareness issue?
Well, Martin, thank you for the question. I don't think we can respond at this point in time, because if we were to, if we had concluded that the code was not appropriate any longer, then we would decide to do standards today. And that's a decision that we cannot make based on what we know and what we have tested. What I was saying is that given the significant lack of proximity, let's call it like that. Some of them know that the code exists and they have ethical implications, but we will need to do more work in terms of understanding how the existing standards work for the purpose that we all need them to work. So I'm afraid I can't respond to you today, and that's exactly why we are doing all this outreach. There will be a survey which will be published. Can you help me? But I think that's very shortly. It will be distributed in a couple of weeks or something like that.
Next week.
Next week, a survey, but much broader survey that we will launch to gather information. The Pulse survey already gives us a little bit of a notion about where are the areas where some CFOs feel more probably unprotected, and it's true with respect to pressure, clearly, but also the use of data, the decisions to be made about data sources and etc. So there is already some indication, but the initial survey, the Pulse survey, cannot be taken for as a reliable sample, final sample for us to make decisions. So, Martin, I think that in the next meeting with the PIOB, I hope I can bring more information. But it can the evolution of the project can go in many directions depending on what we will find out. For sure, what we have found, what we have realized for now, it's that everything is okay in this area, and that this first line of defense is feeling is being left very fragile. One thing that they speak about as well is about what they call the loneliness, because they feel, when they understand that there is an ethical dilemma, that there is a pressure, that there is something that they don't know exactly how to solve because there are two interests which are conflicting, they are alone in the company because, of course, they will not speak most of the times with the CEO because there are some tensions between the two and etc. But they don't know exactly where to go through. And that's where, for instance, the PAOs may play an important role. We don't know. The fact is that the sentiment is that something relevant needs to be done. Because otherwise you will keep the status quo, which is not taking this first line of defense seriously in terms of ethical standards, monitoring, etc., and then everything falls on the auditors because because it's a more regulated space, with more oversight, with more visible, more scrutiny, and every time there is a problem, you look at the auditor and ask, where was the auditor? And many times, rightly enough, but nobody asks, where was the preparer? Where was the CFO that started the problem that then the auditor had to deal with? So it's this value chain that we need to address properly to make sure that the responsibilities are addressed at the right level.
Thanks, Martin, and thanks, Gabriela. I note that we are 12 minutes to the end of your presentation. Gabriela, do you want to move on to the last bit? Thanks.
Sure, thank you very much, Chigo. So the last bit is on technology, and I think I'm going to be quick. As the PIOB knows, the IESBA issued standards on technology 2 years and something ago. I think it was December 2023, and issued over this multi-year effort between 2018 and 2022 significant technology-related materials, thought leadership pieces, guidance materials, etc. some of them in collaboration and partnership with other global partners, etc. So the work was significant and extensive and solid, I'd say, already. And after December 2023, what the IESBA decided was to keep technology under monitoring, but we needed to allocate the resources to other things after issuing all these materials and being satisfied that we had done a good job with these standards and these thought leadership materials. This doesn't mean that the IESBA has been not doing anything in that respect. It's just less visible, and probably we need to give it a little bit more visibility, but also, of course, increase a little bit the attention once 2 years and something have passed since the issuance of these standards and of the technology related pieces, thought leadership pieces. So next slide, please. So the IESBA technology work stream is distributing its attention and its efforts among several initiatives and areas, updating non-authoritative material and issuing or preparing new non-authoritative material. We have just launched the podcast. I don't know if the PIOB members had the opportunity to see it, but the first episode of the IESBA Decoding Ethics, I think it's the name of the podcast, has already been issued, and we are about to issue the second episode of this podcast. The first one was based on the IESBA conference in Lisbon in September 2025. We have a technology experts group with whom we work together very closely, and they work like, on the one hand, like a sounding board, but they are bringing any new technological issues to us that may deserve some attention on our end, and doing this environmental scanning by the staff. The coordination with the IAASB on this topic has been continuous. More recently, we have been intensifying this coordination. But before I speak about it, let me just go very quickly through. No, you can move the slide. Thank you very much. We are moving to some new initiatives where we will coordinate with IAASB as needed, of course. I'd like to highlight that we have in preparation an IESBA staff alert, which will at some point in time be issued, I hope, on disruptive emerging technologies. And this can be the first of a series of staff alerts based on the experience that we had with the private equity investment staff alert, which worked perfectly for our stakeholders. It was timely, it was effective, and raised a lot of interest and attention. So we think that in similar topics, we could take a similar approach by issuing these staff alerts. These staff alerts will be on disruptive emerging technologies, and then there will be two other ones, I hope, on the use of ethics and artificial intelligence, one for PIIBs and another one for PAPPs. We have also been engaging in some external or outreach initiatives. Just to give you some examples, so the IESBA conference had this panel on technology. There was something last year during the Nordic Federation of Accountants where we had a specific panel on technology where the IESBA also presented. We participated on a joint conversation with the ACCA. So we are taking these opportunities to promote a little bit the standards and the work that we have been doing, but also to create new opportunities to discuss the relationship between ethics and AI, ethics and technology, which is top of mind for many, many professionals these days. So this is on top of what we did before and that we intend to update as needed. The topics that we are also planning to cover and starting to cover and work upon, it's the ethical challenges and opportunities from the use of artificial intelligence, and digital assets, which is something to which our stakeholders have been directing us very frequently and more intensively over the last times, mainly I think in Hong Kong. They are very interested in the topic. IOSCO is also starting to cover this topic, and sooner or later we will need to do some work on it. And the impact of quantum computing, which is a very difficult topic, but seems of relevance also from the perspective of the ethical issues that it raises. And last slide, finally, of course, this all is being done with in coordination with IAASB, ongoing coordination, and this coordination happens in very many ways. We mutually observe the meetings of our respective consultative groups, advisory groups, and etc. So there is always a representative of the IESBA on the IAASB meetings, and vice versa. We have regular meetings at the staff level. At the SAC, the Stakeholder Advisory Council, we had the opportunity to present jointly on the technology-related topics for ethics and audit. And we may be exploring some joint non-authoritative material in 2026, besides the regular updates between the two boards on the technology initiative. So what I wanted to reassure the PIOB about is that this coordination is being taken very seriously. I think that Tom and Billy, I don't know if they are still here, but they can confirm that, and they both mention it in their presentation. Working together every time it makes sense, but for sure monitoring ongoing the monitoring of both boards' work, so that we can early identify any possible contradictions, overlaps, inconsistencies, or need to refine some kind of integrated approach with respect to specific topics. We are not leaving that unattended. On the contrary, very carefully and proactively monitoring the developments and monitoring the work of both boards, so that we can take proactive action in case it is necessary to coordinate our activities and our initiatives and our work. And I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriela. Board members, comments, questions on this important topic of technology? Mark.
Yeah, I just had a question. In 2023, amendments were made to the code itself in respect of technology. In all that you're proposing now, you only mention NAM and not amendments to the code in respect of these further technological developments, AI, quantum computing, etc. What's the sort of rationale behind that change of approach to go for NAM rather than standard setting?
Well, Mark, I'm not sure I fully understood your question, but there was no change of approach. In 2023, we issued standards, and so far, we have been monitoring the developments and the environment, but we have not faced any situation or conclusion that the standards that we issued need to be amended, or that we need to issue more standards. That's not what we have concluded so far. Doesn't mean that this may not happen in this environmental and technical monitoring. We can come one day to that conclusion, but so far we are satisfied that the standards that we issued can still respond properly, strongly to these new or evolving ethical challenges. Now, what we may be missing is a more intensive and extensive sharing of these standards and of what they mean and the responses that they include to our stakeholders. So it's really, if you want, an extended rollout of the standards. And I don't think that anything until now, I'm sure that until now, the board has not at all faced any concrete situation which says, well, the code does not have an appropriate response. If we come to that conclusion, of course, we will start a new standard setting project, and we will develop new standards. Hopefully, that will not be the case so soon, given all the comments that we have been receiving about the need to lower the pace of standard setting, and we have committed not to issue any standards until 2027. But in this case, it's not really because we have made that commitment. It's really because we haven't come to the conclusion. We don't have any evidence that the code is not responding to the challenges and the needs of the market in terms of ethical dilemmas and issues posed by the use of technology. I don't know if I responded to your question.
You have. Thank you very much. Very clear.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gabriela. I guess Ken's hand went down. I thought he wanted to add something. No. Ken?
No, that's okay. Gabriel has essentially addressed the question. Really, the point I wanted to make was essentially that the standard, the revisions to the code that the board issued in 2023 just came into effect December 24. So it's still very early days, and the revisions have all been developed on a principles basis. So very much designed to be enduring, and they've been developed with full view and understanding of the developments that were occurring already at the time, especially in the space of artificial intelligence. So I think we're all up to date, so to speak, but we're maintaining a very close monitoring watch on developments in the marketplace, and of course we'll be as responsive as possible the moment we identify any sort of gaps in the code, as Gabriel has put it.
Thanks, Ken. Any other thoughts? We have completed the hour for Gabriela. If there's no other hands, let me take the opportunity to thank Gabriela and her board and Ken and team in delivering this update to us today, and acknowledge the progress they are making throughout their various, these key 3 ones that they presented today. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Gabriela. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all of you, and above all to those for whom it's so late, like Tom and Henry. I'm sorry for that. Thank you very much for your patience. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Tom.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Bye, Tom.
Billy. Thank you very much. Our next agenda item, items for approval, and that would be the minutes of the October meeting. If I turn to my board members, are there any comments, or are we happy to approve those minutes? Board members? Mark?
Yeah, I did have one comment when I read through, and that was on what's becoming my favorite topic, which is the role of the CFO. I think in our last meeting, I did actually make the point that my view was that the project isn't broad enough, and they should be considering guidance for accountants in business generally. And I don't think that quite comes across in the minutes.
Thank you.
Perhaps work
Mark.
with Martin on that to agree a wording.
Thank you, Mark. I'm sure that would come in given the presentations that we've just had and the preparation material that we considered earlier. At least the point has not been lost entirely. It still came through in those preparatory sessions earlier. So thank you for that. Martin, you'll work with Mark just for the wording, and then we're happy to adopt. Any other comments? Other than the amendments that Mark is proposing, are we happy to approve? I see thumbs up. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Martin and team, for that. The minutes are approved, subject to that amendment. Then we move on to the last item of the day, but one, which is items for noting. And I'll hand over to the Secretary General to take us through. Martin?
Thank you, Seko, and really I can be brief on both the items, and generally this is just for the outside world watching these points. So I just note that we received from the Standard Setting Board's team the quarterly report on the approvals timetable and the due process, and we find that that is including all the things we were expecting to include. So we note that, and I thank them for providing that in a timely way.
Thank you.
That's the first point, Chair. Should I cover the second point?
Yeah, I don't see any hands. Please proceed.
Thank you. And again, I will be brief, and really for the purpose of those who will watch the live stream or watch the recording of this, I'd just like to know that we have finalised, but for one detail, later in the year, we finalised the calendar for the allocation of PIOB observers to the Standard Setting Board meetings. The participation of observers will be in person. So I'm pleased to say that I'll just speak now about the start of the year, that Tom Furusawa will be our observer at the IESBA board in March, and Dave Sullivan will be our observer for the IAASB board meeting in March as well, both being in person. And I also take the opportunity to note and thank you, Chair, for this additional commitment on your side that you will be observing the meeting of the Stakeholder Advisory Council, which takes place at the end of April, that falling conveniently for being shortly after the PIOB's own board meeting in April. So, as I said, the allocation of the observers for the rest of the year is practically complete, but we'll make that public and clear when the last detail has been completed.
Thank you, Martin. Much appreciated, the update, and I'm sure once it's up and running, it will be available for all to view. Thank you. I don't think we have any other business noted, so let me take the opportunity to thank board members for quite an active session today, and particularly those that are on the other side of the world. I know this is almost 3 a.m. for you guys, so thank you very much for staying awake and participating this evening. On my end, it's just after 8. I think Mark's end is just after 6, and Madrid is just after 7. So you can see the wide range of, and Felipe is on the same time zone, isn't it? Yeah. And so thank you so much for all the contributions made today. We shall meet on Thursday. I tried as much as I could to keep to the time for the sake of those who are on the other side of tomorrow already. I'll try my best again on Thursday, just so that I don't let you guys sleep at 5 in the morning. Thanks so much, and see you on Thursday.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.